During his college career, wide receiver Rae Carruth was named a first-team All-American in 1996 before he went on to play for the Carolina Panthers in the NFL, leading up to the fall of 1999. Carruth was dating 24-year-old real estate agent Cherika Adams. On November the 16th, she was gunned down near the football player's home in Charlotte, North Carolina. The woman was 8 months pregnant with Carruth's son at the time. She was shot multiple times in a drive-by, of which the perpetrator was subsequently identified as Van Brett Watkins, a nightclub manager who was an associate of Carruth. Before passing out from her gunshot wounds, Adams called 911 and implicated her boyfriend in the murder. She revealed that Carruth was in a vehicle in front of her and that he'd slowed down as another car pulled up beside her and an assassin opened fire. Adams told the operator, "I think he did it. I don't know what to think." Carruth fled the scene in the shooting's immediate aftermath. Adams was rushed to the hospital where she fell into a coma. Doctors delivered the baby, named Chancellor Lee, via emergency cesarean section, but he suffered permanent brain damage and cerebral palsy as a result of being without oxygen for 70 minutes. Carruth went to the police and posted a $3 million bail on the condition that if Adams or the child died, he would surrender to the authorities. Adams passed away on December the 14th. Carruth went on the run but was captured the following day in Tennessee, where he was found hiding in the trunk of a car outside a motel. The trunk contained bottles of his urine, along with clothes, snacks, and nearly $4,000 in cash. A few days later, he was suspended by the Panthers indefinitely. During the legal proceedings that followed, Carruth rejected a plea deal for second-degree murder and went to trial, whereupon prosecutors sought the death penalty. Watkins testified that Carruth had hired him as a hitman because Adams had refused to terminate the pregnancy and he didn't want to pay child support. Carruth's lawyer, David Rudolph, claimed that the football player was caught up in a drug deal gone bad with Watkins. The latter reportedly questioned Adams about the athlete's whereabouts and then shot her in a fit of sudden rage. After she reportedly gave him the middle finger, Carruth didn't testify during his trial, but Rudolph told the media that he flat out wasn't there when the shooting occurred. Watkins was jailed for a minimum of 40 years for the murder of Adams, and he died from natural causes behind bars. Carruth avoided the death penalty but was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, shooting into an occupied vehicle and using an instrument to destroy an unborn child. In February of 2018, he sent a 16-page letter to a Charlotte media outlet in which he apologized to Adams' mother and for the impairment of his son. Chancellor Lee was in his late teens at the time, and Carruth would later pledge to avoid contact with him, stating it would be in everyone's best interest. In September of 2018, Rudolph spoke to the media and revealed that Carruth had finally opened up about the night of Adams' murder. Rudolph told the Charlotte Observer he was scared and he took off, and he's not particularly proud of that. It's not sort of a heroic thing to do. Big football player, running, but that's what he did. Carruth was released in October of 2018 after spending 18 years behind bars. Number 9. Bruno Fernandes de Souza. Leading up to 2010, soccer player Bruno Fernandes de Souza, also known simply as Bruno, had become a vital component and fan favorite at Flamengo, a Rio de Janeiro-based club that was among the biggest teams in Brazil. He became known for his vital saves, particularly during penalties and scoring multiple free-kick goals for the team, which is a rarity for keepers. At the height of his fame and fortune, Bruno was found guilty of assaulting, torturing, and murdering his mistress and the mother of his youngest child, Elisa Samudio. In 2009, she was working as a call girl, an adult film actress, while pursuing dreams of becoming a model. In May of that same year, she and Bruno met during a barbecue at the home of another Flamengo player. They had intimate relations and continued seeing each other even though Bruno was married. Elisa stopped working in the adult industry at Bruno's request, and he promised to leave his wife and marry her. However, upon learning that Elisa had become pregnant with his child, Bruno terminated the relationship. In October of 2009, Elisa filed a police complaint accusing the man of kidnapping and assaulting her. She said that the star goalkeeper and 2 of his friends had held her in a private prison. She was beaten, forced to take abortive substances, and had a gun pointed at her head by Bruno. The case bounced around in court, but even though she was 5 months pregnant, a judge denied her request for official protection. The prevailing narrative was Bruno's claim that Elisa wanted her 15 minutes of fame and that she was making up lies about him. Elisa gave birth to a boy on February the 10th of 2010. The woman maintained that Bruno was the father and that she could prove it, while he vehemently denied it. Elisa sued Bruno for child support while he was in the midst of negotiating a lucrative transfer with AC Milan. Then, On June the 4th of 2010, Eliza headed to Bruno's farm in Esmeraldas, Minas Gerais. The athlete had asked her to come, seemingly willing to negotiate a settlement. Eliza never returned and was never seen alive again. Bruno became a prime suspect in her disappearance, and the key piece of evidence came in the form of a confession from his teenage cousin. On July the 6th of 2010, he claimed that at Bruno's orders, Eliza had been murdered and dismembered by drug dealers. Parts of her body were reportedly fed to Rottweiler dogs, while other remains were encased in concrete. Bruno was arrested alongside several accomplices, and as the legal proceedings progressed, he was dropped by Flamengo and no longer represented by the club's lawyers. Bruno was reported to have confessed to organizing the plot at some point, but the victim's body was never found. In March of 2013, following a lengthy and convoluted case, he was given a 22-year prison term for the assault, torture, and murder of Eliza. He served less than 7 years before he was released in February of 2017. Pending an appeal, he was bombarded with team offers and eventually signed with Boa Esporte, much to the outrage of many in Brazilian society. Bruno said at the time, "What happened happened. I made a mistake, a serious one. But mistakes happen in life. I'm not a bad guy. People try to bury my dreams because of one mistake, but I asked God for forgiveness. So I'm carrying on with my career, dude." He made 5 appearances for Boa Esporte before he was re-imprisoned in April of 2017 following a Supreme Court ruling. He was released again in 2019 and went on to sign with 3 more soccer teams. Number 8. Gavin Ware Jr. NFL tight end Gavin Ware Jr. had short stints with the Washington Redskins, the San Francisco 49ers and the Oakland Raiders, prior to the latter team waiving him in the summer of 2005. He only appeared in 16 NFL games before his career ended. By the spring of 2021, he'd had trouble with the law for offenses that included assault, theft, and intent to manufacture or deliver a controlled substance. Ware was jailed for 2 years for the latter charges. Following his release, he was stopped for speeding at around 115 miles per hour in Magnolia, Texas. On April the 19th of 2021, a search of his vehicle produced a loaded AK-47 assault rifle and a loaded 9mm pistol, as well as cocaine, methamphetamine, and marijuana. He faced multiple drugs and weapons charges and was released on bond. 6 days after that incident, his girlfriend, 29-year-old Taylor Pomaski, disappeared from the home they shared in Spring, Texas. She was last seen during a party at the residence, and neighbors reported that she and Ware were involved in a violent row at the time. Eric Zuliger, Pomaski's ex-boyfriend, told a media outlet that she'd reached out to him throughout the month of April. Zuliger said she was in danger, she was in trouble. There was violence. She referenced a gun being pulled on her. She was very scared, very nervous. Zuliger added that they'd discussed her getting out of there, getting back on her feet, getting herself set and stabilized. Roughly 2 months after Pomaski's disappearance, the authorities identified Ware as a suspect. The former athlete eventually pleaded guilty to the drug and gun charges stemming from his Magnolia traffic stop on the day that his trial was due to commence. He was jailed for 15 years. In December of 2021, Pomaski's remains were found dumped in a ditch in Harris County, Texas. The authorities learned that she died under exceptionally violent circumstances. She'd been battered with a blunt object, cut with a knife, strangled, and then her body was set on fire. Ware was indicted for her murder in late July of 2022. He ultimately reached a deal with prosecutors and pleaded guilty in exchange for a 30-year sentence handed down on May the 7th of 2025. Number 7. Eric Naposki. On December the 15th of 1994, millionaire investor William McLaughlin was found dead in the kitchen of his home in Newport Beach, California. The 52-year-old man had been shot 6 times. His living girlfriend, Nanette Ann Johnston, arrived at the address as the police were investigating the murder scene. The woman was roughly 25 years McLaughlin's junior and had met him after placing a magazine ad seeking the companionship of a wealthy man. She appeared to be devastated upon learning that he'd been shot. The authorities subsequently learned that Johnston was having an affair with former NFL linebacker Eric Naposki. He consequently became a suspect in McLaughlin's murder. One piece of evidence in that regard came when he was stopped for an outstanding traffic warrant about a week after the incident. It was then that McLaughlin's license plate number was found etched in the page of a notebook recovered from Naposki's car. When he was interviewed by law enforcement, Naposki initially told them that they were pretty close before admitting that that they were dating. One Newport Beach Police Department investigator reported that Naposki was looking for an engagement ring for her only a month and a half after McLaughlin's murder. During his police interviews, Naposki first denied owning a gun but then admitted that he had a 9mm pistol, adding that he didn't know its whereabouts. Naposki worked as a bouncer in a club and he maintained that he was on the job within the time frame that the murder took place. By 1995, the DA had accepted his alibi and the case went cold. Naposki, who was at the time in his late 20s, relaunched his football career playing in the World League of American Football in Europe. He played 4 seasons for the Barcelona Dragons and won the 1997 World Bowl with them before retiring. In 2009, the McLaughlin murder case was reopened and the narrative that took shape was that secret lovers, Naposki and Johnston, had conspired to kill him for financial gain. In May of 2009, 15 years after the murder, Naposki was arrested. By the fall of 2012, both he and Johnston were sentenced to life without parole. During their legal proceedings, Johnston was depicted as a young mother of 2 who seduced McLaughlin to gain control of his finances. She lived in his luxury home and was in charge of his financial affairs. It was discovered that she'd faked McLaughlin's signature on several large checks. From his death, she stood to gain roughly $2.5 million through a combination of his savings and life insurance policy. Although Naposki's alibi had been initially accepted, that matter was reconsidered based on the fact that the club where he'd worked as a bouncer was only a few hundred yards from the murder scene. Naposki ardently maintained his innocence. He was ultimately convicted solely on the grounds of circumstantial evidence, as there was no murder weapon or fingerprint evidence, as well as no surveillance footage, eyewitness or DNA evidence to tie him to the murder. He launched a number of unsuccessful appeals in the years since his conviction. Number 6. Jayson Williams.
Please forgive me for the pain that I've caused to you, my children. You deserve a better father, son, brother than I have been.
Jayson Williams played 11 seasons in the NBA, primarily for the New Jersey Nets, before he suffered an on-court career-ending injury in April of 1999. He broke his leg following a collision with teammate Stephon Marbury and had surgery that resulted in a plate and 5 screws being inserted in his leg. In mid-February of 2002, Williams, his friends, and a few members of the Harlem Globetrotters went out to eat in Pennsylvania following a Globetrotters show. They were then driven back to an after-party at Williams's 30,000 square foot estate in New Jersey. Their limo driver was 55-year-old Costas Gus Christofi. In the early hours of February the 14th, a frantic 911 call was made from Williams's property, with the caller stating, "We have an emergency. Somebody just got shot." Officers rushed to the scene and reported that Gus was lying on the floor with a blood-soaked shirt and clearly deceased. He'd suffered a shotgun blast to the chest and was pronounced dead at 3:28 a.m. Williams told the authorities that while he was giving Christoph a tour of his home, the man grabbed a loaded Browning 12-gauge shotgun, pressed it to his chest and pulled the trigger. Christophe was described by loved ones as a man with a zest for life, and they considered Williams' version of events to be just crazy. Christophe had gotten clean from a drug habit, and he was helping others dealing with substance abuse. His life was on track, and by all accounts, he would have had no discernible reason to end it. There were multiple suspicious aspects about the scene as well. The shotgun was at a considerable distance from Christophe's body, and there was no blood trail. Had he been handling the weapon, the shot would have been at an angle, but it went straight into his chest instead. Additionally, the weapon presented no fingerprints and had been wiped clean. 2 days after the shooting, following an autopsy report, a homicide investigation was launched. Consequently, Williams' lawyer described the shooting as a tragic accident without providing additional details. Investigators pressed witnesses threatening obstruction charges, and they agreed to testify after being offered immunity. They revealed that Williams, who had cabinets filled with loaded weapons, had been showing off the Browning shotgun during a tour of his home. It went off in his hands and Christophe was fatally shot in the moments that followed. The athlete and his guests got their story straight and agreed to cover up the incident. Williams handed his bloody clothes to a friend and then dove into an indoor pool to clean gunpowder residue and other traces of evidence off his body. 45 minutes were reported to have passed between the shooting and the placing of the 911 call. Williams was arrested and charged with reckless manslaughter. In April of 2004, he was convicted on 4 counts of covering up the crime, but the jury deadlocked on the manslaughter charges. 6 years passed before a second trial was set to commence. However, On January the 11th of 2010, Williams pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, resulting in a 5-year sentence with parole after 18 months.
Mr. Christophe died from the gunshot wound.
Do you admit that your handling of the gun was reckless conduct?
Yes.
Were Mr. Christophe's injuries caused by your reckless handling of the shotgun?
Yes.
He served his term at Rikers Island and was released in April of 2012. In an interview taken after his prison stint, Williams said that he was a coward on the night of the shooting. He told the media, "There is nothing I can do or say to bring Mr. Christophe back. If there was, I would do it. The cover-up was selfishness. Me trying to protect myself." Number 5. Gavin Grant. In July of 2010, professional English soccer player Gavin Grant was one of 3 men jailed for life in connection to a 2004 murder. At the time, Grant was still listed as a midfielder playing for Bradford City. Following previous stints at Millwall and Wycombe Wanderers, his success as an athlete was paralleled by his involvement in ruthless gang violence in Stonebridge Park in northwest London. Gareth Downey and Damian Williams were sentenced alongside Grant for the shooting that ended the life of 21-year-old Leon Labastide in May of 2004. Detectives suspected that the incident, which followed a falling out between Labastide and the others, led to the outbreak of an all-out war and up to 30 tit-for-tat shootings. Grant had previously been accused of gunning down Jamal Moore in 2005, but he was cleared in 2007. He would have likely gotten away with Labastide's murder, but new witnesses came forward and tied him to the incident. Labastide's mother said in a statement, "His senseless killing by so-called friends who grew up with him has left it hard for me to understand the futility of snatching Leon's future whilst in the same breath destroying their own." Grant, Downey and Williams were given life sentences with respective minimum terms of 25 years. Number 4. Keith Appling. After a prodigious college career playing for Michigan State University, Keith Appling went undrafted in the 2014 NBA draft. He eventually made sporadic appearances for the Orlando Magic before he was waived in 2016. Appling went on to play in the D-League before he was jailed for a year. In 2017, for carrying a concealed weapon and resisting an officer, he returned to basketball after serving his sentence and played for teams in the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and Italy before his career ended. In February of 2020, Appling was stopped for driving erratically in Macomb County and found to be in possession of 19 grams of heroin. The golf ball-sized amount was found in a sandwich bag in the pocket of his car. In late 2020, Appling was given 18 months probation with rigorous conditions after pleading guilty to delivery or manufacture of a controlled substance. By many accounts, the once promising athlete was given a second chance, but he ultimately wasted it. The following year, he gunned down a relative in Detroit. On May the 22nd of 2021, Appling and 66-year-old Clyde Edmonds argued over a gun at a home on Whitcomb Street. Edmonds' wife and Appling's mother were first cousins. At some point during the dispute, Appling opened fire on Edmonds. Responding officers found him on the lawn suffering from multiple gunshot wounds and he was pronounced dead. In a hospital shortly thereafter, Appling had fled the scene. He was driven away by his girlfriend, Natalie Bannister, who subsequently lied to law enforcement with regard to what she knew about the shooting. 30-year-old Bannister eventually pleaded guilty to 1 count of lying to a police officer and was sentenced to 18 months of probation. In February of 2023, Appling admitted second-degree murder and a firearm charge. He received 18 to 40 years for the first charge and 2 years for the second. Number 3. Craig Titus and Kelly Ryan. On December the 14th of 2005, the body of a young woman was found in the trunk of a burning car in the Nevada desert. She was identified as 28-year-old Melissa James. An examination of the charred body revealed that the woman had been drugged, bound, shocked with a stun gun and strangled. A lack of smoke in her lungs indicated that she was dead before the vehicle was set on fire. There was morphine in her system and the amount was enough to kill almost any human being. James was the living assistant of married couple Craig Titus and Kelly Ryan, both of whom were professional bodybuilders. Ryan was a Fitness America and Fitness International winner, while Titus was an International Fitness and Bodybuilding Federation pro who frequently placed among the top 10 in his class in competitions. James managed various affairs for them. The car in which her body was found, a red Jaguar, belonged to Ryan. The couple were interviewed and Titus admitted that he'd had an affair with James at some point. However, he and Ryan maintained that they terminated their working relationship with the 28-year-old and evicted her after finding out that she'd been embezzling money from them. The couple claimed that she'd stolen Ryan's car and fled, adding that they didn't call the police because they hoped for a peaceful resolution of the matter. They were released. pending further investigation. The authorities gradually discovered more evidence which suggested the couple had played a role in James's death. A financial report indicated that her card had been used to purchase 7 bottles of lighter fluid at a Walmart near Titus and Ryan's home. Surveillance footage from the early morning of December the 14th showed that Ryan had used James's card to make the purchase. On December the 21st, investigators returned to the athlete's home for further questioning and discovered that they'd fled. The authorities released a public appeal for information and a manhunt was launched. Around the same time, a witness came forward to reveal that she'd been with the couple on the night before the body was discovered and that they'd confided in her about an altercation with the victim. James and Ryan reportedly fought, at which point the former pulled a taser. Ryan overpowered her, took the device and used it on her. Titus said that he then body slammed James and choked her out. Evidence found at the couple's home corroborated the story, indicating that a taser was fired 5 times on the afternoon of December the 13th. After a 9-day manhunt, Titus and Ryan were arrested in Boston, Massachusetts, alongside a man by the name of Anthony Gross. He was described as a bodybuilding groupie and was suspected of assisting the couple in fleeing the law and covering up the murder. Gross would eventually be given probation after pleading no contest to charges of accessory to arson and conspiracy to commit arson. A decision was made by the Washoe County District Attorney to try the couple together. Titus and Ryan initially pleaded not guilty to felony murder charges, meaning they risked getting the death penalty if convicted. Their version of events was that James had succumbed to a drug overdose, whereupon they panicked and disposed of the body, fearing how publicity over the incident would impact their bodybuilding careers. Titus and Ryan maintained that they hadn't been fleeing justice and that they were actually on holiday when the police arrested them. However, days before their 2008 trial was due to commence, the couple submitted guilty pleas. Titus was sentenced to 21 to 55 years in prison after admitting second-degree murder, kidnapping, and arson. Ryan pleaded guilty to arson and battery with a deadly weapon with significant bodily harm, for which she was handed 2 consecutive terms of 3 to 13 years in prison. While behind bars in 2009, Ryan filed for divorce from Titus, and it was finalized in 2017 when she was released. Today's topic was requested by Spider Singer and iBoogie 1062. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Anthony Wayne Smith. In November of 2015, former Oakland Raiders defensive end Anthony Wayne Smith was convicted of 3 counts of murder with special circumstances of torture, kidnapping, and multiple murders. In January of 2016, he was handed 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. All of the murders were cold cases that were opened in light of new evidence and witness testimonies. Smith was characterized as a violent offender with an insatiable hunger for vengeance. He was the top draft pick for the LA Raiders in 1990 and ended his contract with them in 1997. A few years later, in 1999, the man was involved in the murder of brothers Kevin and Ricky Nettles. They were abducted from their car wash business and later found riddled with bullet wounds and with their heads bound with duct tape. There was evidence of torture, as the brothers bore marks suspected to have been inflicted with a hot iron during the abduction of the Nettles. On November the 10th of 1999, Smith was reported to have disguised himself as a law enforcement officer. An employee of Ricky's recounted that he saw Smith, who was dressed like a detective and had a badge on his belt, usher the man into the back of a car where an accomplice was waiting behind the wheel. Smith told the witness that he was taking Ricky down for questioning. The man and his brother Kevin were never seen alive again. A 2011 search of Smith's San Bernardino storage unit produced ammunition, law enforcement clothes, and equipment, in addition to 4 books about committing crimes, 2 of which were titled Kill Without Joy and Professional Killers. An inside look. A man by the name of Terry Ware told the authorities that he and Dennis Henderson were in Mar Vista, Los Angeles in June of 2001 when they were ambushed by mask-wearing armed men. Henderson was pistol whipped and his gold chain was snatched from his neck. Ware reported that he himself was bound, blindfolded, and driven around. The abductors reportedly took $10 off Ware and eventually released him in an Inglewood alley, telling him, "This is not for you." 33-year-old Henderson was subsequently found dead in the back of a rental car with at least 34 stab wounds, including 1 to the eye. Smith was tied to the murder by multiple witnesses and through the rope and zip ties found on Henderson, which were of the same type as the ones found in his possession. Smith was convicted of killing the Nettles brothers and Henderson, but no motive was given for the crimes. Aside from a suspected personal grudge pertaining to failed business dealings, the 46-year-old former athlete was suspected of involvement in a 4th murder for which 2 of his accomplices were convicted. In the fall of 2008, mechanic Murillo Ponce was found On a Lancaster roadside near the Antelope Valley poppy fields, the 31-year-old was beaten and shot dead. A jury deadlocked on finding Smith guilty, and the case was eventually dismissed, in spite of strong public suspicions that he'd been directly responsible for Ponce's death. Number 1. Mark Rogowski. In the 1980s, Mark "Gator" Rogowski was part of a wave of pro skaters, along with Tony Hawk and Steve Caballero, who exploded in popularity with the success of vert-style skateboarding. In 1987, at a show in Scottsdale, Arizona, Rogowski met Brandy McLean and her best friend, aspiring model Jessica Bergston. Rogowski and McLean dated for several years and appeared together in media campaigns for Vision, Rowski's sponsor and one of the top skateboard-selling brands of the time. In the years that followed, the pro skater sustained a severe accident after dropping from a window and landing on a fence in West Germany. In the aftermath of his recovery, he became an evangelical Christian. The decision strained his relationship with McLean, whom he reportedly told that he couldn't be intimate anymore unless they got married. They eventually broke up acrimoniously, and Rogowski subsequently threatened McLean as well as her new boyfriend. On March 20th of 1991, Rogowski spoke to Bergston for the first time in years. They spent the day together in San Diego and then headed to his home. 21-year-old Bergston disappeared in the aftermath, and her father put up posters around the city asking for information. A friend of Rogowski's, who was also the pro skater's spiritual advisor, would remember his mood shifting when they came upon one of the posters. On April 10th of 1991, Bergston's body was found in the Shell Canyon Desert, but it was so decomposed that she initially couldn't be identified. Around the same time, Rogowski confessed to his spiritual advisor that he'd killed the girl from the poster. The latter encouraged him to come clean, and on April 11th of 1991, Rogowski surrendered to the authorities. He revealed that while Bergston was in his home, he struck her from behind with a metal anti-theft device. While she was dazed from multiple blows to the head, Rogowski handcuffed her and dragged her to his bedroom. He forced himself on Bergston while she was shackled to his bed. Rogowski at some point placed her in a surfboard bag to prevent neighbors from hearing the commotion. He then strangled or suffocated her to death before disposing of her remains in a shallow grave in the desert. Rogowski told law enforcement that he'd killed Bergston in an act of revenge against McLean, claiming that the women were made out of the same mold. He faced the death penalty after being charged with enhanced murder for killing Bergston during an act of abuse. Rogowski, who was at the time in his mid-20s, admitted first-degree murder and assault. During his sentencing, which took place in March of 1992, enhanced security was present and metal detectors were put in place out of concern that Bergston's father would try to harm him in court. In an impact statement, the man called him a coward who would die 1,000 deaths. Rogowski received consecutive sentences of 8 years for the assault and 25 to life for the murder. In a subsequent 1992 interview, he would place part of the blame for what happened on Bergston for tempting him, stating, "I didn't realize what kind of a purring feline she was, and I was scared I'd be discovered with this wayward woman." Updates from November of 2024 indicated that Rogowski remained incarcerated after he was denied parole for 3 years. Thanks for watching. Would you rather be tackled at full speed by an NFL linebacker or take a full power shot to the head from Cristiano Ronaldo at 3 yards? Let us know in the comments section below.